Ever wondered why nothing seems to work? Ever wondered why we can't seem to get economic growth going? Is it all caused by just not building enough houses or not building enough wind farms and solar farms? Is it all about regulation and barriers to growth? Well, listen to the Chancellor and it would all seem pretty straightforward. We're going to have the fastest economic growth rate in the G7, and we're going to have that by net zero 2030, flat out to hit an impossible target. 1.5 million homes by 2030, despite the fact that home ownership has dropped back. Is it the blockers that are standing in our way? All those who actually care about the natural environment and try to protect our natural capital? Is this what it's all about? And getting tougher and tougher with regulation of the regulators. Get rid of regulation and all will be well. Those barriers will drop away. And this government's not novel in its approach. We've had a decade and a half of these kinds of policies. Of all the things that could get the economy going again, there is one that stands out. Wouldn't it be good if our network infrastructures, our utilities, actually had properly maintained assets such that the sorts of costs that we all face, businesses, individuals, getting to work, hoping the train is actually going to run on time, driving over the roads and hoping the potholes aren't going to take out your tyres, hoping that you're going to get in a place where there is a proper mobile signal so you can actually operate and connect, hoping you're going to get a grid connection so that if you build a data center, there's actually a set of wires connecting it all up. And so on and so on. These basic infrastructures are core to economic success. They are the inputs for an entire society and an economy to deliver its outputs. Who would have thought that we could live in a country where there are still all these not spots? Who would have thought that we can have a world in which a Thames water treatment works is in such poor state that the FT can have a front page article on how many people and how much of an emergency it would be if this water treatment works failed? Or take a look at the Mogden sewage works in London and just see the dire state that it's in. You can see that on a panorama programme, which the Thames management thought would advance their case and make them better understood, if only. These are the sorts of things which a modern economy can't have and can't face. And there's a simple reason. If you build too much infrastructure, if it's really well maintained, then you're going to face a bit higher cost than you could if you just got it to the optimal point where demand would just equal supply. That's one way of looking at stuff. It's just that extra bit of cost burden. But now think what happens if you don't have enough. Extreme case, the lights go out. Well, the costs are disproportionately large. It's an asymmetry. It's vastly better to pay for a bit of insurance, to have a bit better system that's over-maintained, imagine that, than it is to have one that's on the brink almost all the time. A modern economy would build really good infrastructure, it would make sure that's properly maintained, and it would have a surplus, a cushion, to ensure that when the unexpected happens, and let's face it, the unexpected is hardly unexpected in these sectors. When the unexpected happens, there's enough margin in there to support the system. So that's what one would do. And one would get rid of a world in which we have to think, well, from where I am near Oxford, I'd better get an hour earlier train to get to London for a meeting because it may not work and I don't want to be late. All that extra time added on for all those commuters who care about getting to work on time and can't take the risk that the trains actually work as specified. And God forbid you try to get a train on a Monday morning when the weekend seems to continue in the railways, or indeed at the beginning of the weekend rather than normally in a sort of perfectly functioning or properly functioning railway system. All this, the evidence is everywhere about our infrastructure failures and the consequence of the economy. What would you do about it? Well, the first and obvious thing to say is instead of ranting on about investment, capital investment here and elsewhere, why don't we just talk about capital maintenance first? Make sure what we've got works before we get on to shiny new projects which are supposed to transform our world. How about an electricity system which was actually functioning so that we don't ever have debates about whether there's enough power and we don't have the highest electricity prices in the industrial side amongst the developed world? Wouldn't that be just marvellous? How about making sure the railways as we have them work, rather than going off on vanity projects like the massively expensive HS2, which ultimately ends up being an extraordinarily expensive railway from London to Birmingham? These great projects, beloved of politicians down the ages, they can go along and what used to be called cut the ribbon at the opening ceremony and claim credit. But the mundane, actually making sure the sewage works doesn't spill the sewage into the river, making sure that that tap water that you rely upon actually flows through the taps and doesn't leak out, making sure that your mobile phone actually works almost everywhere. These sorts of mundane things are not the sorts of triumphs that politicians can claim, but they are what makes an economy function, and it's their failure which is one of the core reasons why productivity doesn't go up very much and the great efforts to get economic growth going, etc., just don't seem to feed through. The priority should not be the glamour of capital investment first. It should be capital maintenance first, second and third. And only after we've got the actual systems working properly and we've done the maintenance, should it be okay to move on to let's have some of these glamorous new bits of infrastructure. Some of them, by the way, are very good. The Queen Elizabeth line in London is a stunning piece of infrastructure. The Thames Tideway is pretty good too. It can be done, and we do need some extra new bits on our infrastructure, but not the priority. They come second, not first. Now, if you focus on capital maintenance, the next bit, which is the really tough bit, and you can see why politicians shy away, is that maintenance is something that you and I should pay for as we go, pay as you go. It should come out of current bills, not borrowed from the future on what might be called, or used to be called, the never never, and in fact is the future generations will pay when delivered, when eventually delivered. We should pay. We used to in the nationalised industries model. Many problems with that model, of course, and I'm not recommending we return to it, but pay as you go was the norm. And that means that maintenance should come out of your electricity bill, it should come out of your rail ticket, and it should come out of your mobile bill, etc. Now, why don't we do that, apart from the fact that bills might go up and we're not pushing to some future bill payer what's properly down to us? Each generation should ensure that the assets that it inherits in these infrastructures are at least as good as the ones in the future. Well, here we come to the crazy fiscal rules, in particular, that this government's used, but it's not unique if you look backwards. The problem with current spending in the public sector is that it has to come out of current tax and all the other stealth charges that governments impose upon us. If you set yourself a rule, we are going to be living within our means on the current expenditure side by the end of the Parliament, We'll go on borrowing a hell of a lot between now and then just to pay our day-to-day bills. But you know what? We're going to actually balance that bit of the books. Well, that's a good aim. Of course we should. Right? But now the trick. We can, of course, as the Chancellor would say, borrow to invest. Now, investment is about enhancements. It's about things added to these systems which genuinely weren't there before. You can say that the Queen Elizabeth II line is an enhancement. You can say the Thames Tideway is an enhancement. And you might want to say that at between £250 and £750 million a mile, the railway line from London to Birmingham, what's left of HS2, might be an enhancement too. Of course, borrow to invest. The newer asset leaves the next generation better off than we are, and they should pay for it. Now, here's the trick. Supposing we say that lots of the things we call capital maintenance are relabeled as if they're investment. And once we've done that, we can then push them into the box called investment. And then under the government's fiscal rules, well, what can we do? It's pretty straightforward. We can borrow for the capital maintenance that we've relabeled as investment, which it wasn't previously. It's a fantastic statistical trick for the government. And of course, it has radical implications because the current generation is not paying to maintain the assets. We're actually borrowing to fix the tiles that have come off the roof. And that is not intergenerationally fair, of course, but it's not efficient either. And of course, then once maintenance is put in the investment box, well, why not choose the glamorous investment rather than the tedious stuff? If you want an example of this, if you fix a pothole in the road, you might think that's maintenance. I do. It's common sense, isn't it? Well, it's not capital maintenance if the fixing of the pothole is going to last more than 12 months. That's how the statistics handle this. If it's going to last 11 months, then, well, it's capital maintenance and it has to come out of current budgets. This is just stuff you couldn't make up, except if you're a politician pretending you're following the path of fiscal rectitude. And to get this stuff done, it's not rocket science. We know how to fix a leak in a pipe. We know how to fix a sewage works. We know how to make sure the mobile network is across the piece. And we know how to make sure that the signalman turns up on time on Monday morning and the trains are in the right place. Other people do this stuff. It's not rocket science. What it is, and here the government is partly right, it is about regulation, but it's not about too much or too little regulation. It's about the wrong kind of regulation versus the right regulation. And the government's fixated on, we're going to cut back the barriers, the blockers. We're going to sack the chairman of the CMA. We're going to abolish Ofwat. And that's going to bring regulation down. Really? Does anyone actually think that regulation will go down as a result of these bits of performance politics that are trotted out on a regular basis? Ofwat's going to go into the Environment Agency and have a massive new role of supervising the utilities. There's a whole backstory about why that's going to be an amazingly large increase in regulation across the piece. That's what's actually going to happen. And if you look at the detail of regulation, what regulators should be doing is making sure the basics are done, that the utilities have proper asset maps, that they report on the performance of those assets, that they meet the capital maintenance. And those are the outputs that ought to count. Not hard to do this stuff. And it's not hard to incentivize people to get it right. The reason it doesn't happen is not because it's hard. It's because it's not the priority of the government, fixated on its fiscal rules and fixated, like all governments are, on big, shiny enhancement investment projects and blathering on about investment. No, it's capital maintenance that comes first. Oh, and then we can have a bit of shiny new investment on top. So let's get serious. If we want to promote economic growth, we have to address capital maintenance. We aren't, stuff doesn't work, and it should. Thank you very much.